Hello, all you scaredy cats and kittens, and welcome to the Two Scaredy Cats podcast, where we talk about all things strange, unusual, and paranormal. We're your hostess with the mostess. I'm Stacy.
And I'm Kara.
So, Kara, did you do anything this weekend or go anyplace?
Oh, yeah.
What did you do?
We went out, so we went back out to my friend, their family house out in up north near Amish. The Amish place up in Holmes County. Well, Millersburg technically is where we were, but it's right on the edge, the Amish area where there's a lot Berlin and stuff.
Cool.
So we went out there, and they have their own little lake. They have a bunch of land out there, and we were oh, let's go fishing. That's what we were doing, and we were all out there, and it's really secluded. We're probably the only people who go out there every few months to go fishing. So we were fishing down on the river. It was a few of us. We had 3 poles, but we had forgotten one of the poles. Okay. So me and Savannah I fished. I did 1 cast and I caught a fish, and we were okay, well, let's wait, because Brandon had to go drive the gator thing back up to go get the rest of his fishing pole. Mm-hmm. And so he did. And on our drive up to the Holmes County area, we had been making jokes about Bigfoot and stuff, and hunting for Bigfoot. It was just a rolling joke in our friend group, because Leah's or our friend's grandpa, he has seen Bigfoot on the property before. He's this devout Christian man, but he believed in Bigfoot. He was I've seen him, I know he's real. This guy has plaster casts of footprint, the Bigfoot prints, Mm-hmm. He has one somewhere, but I think they donated to the Historical Society in that area, which I want to go talk to them, because they probably know some stuff. But so anyways, so we had been talking about this. I'm just trying to set the scene, because what happens, and we were talking, I was we have to listen for wood knocking, because that's a thing that's associated with Bigfoot. Is you'll hear them knocking as a warning normally to people in the area. I had caught my fish, and me and Savannah were just kind of sitting, chilling, waiting for Brandon to come back before we fished more. And we were just sitting there, and then we heard, it was 3 knocks. They were very kind of slow and weird. It was and it was so, it was behind us too, because we were staring at the lake. The lake was totally covered in algae or whatever, because no one comes out here. It's literally just us, and I think a few of her family members also come out to fish occasionally, but not many people are back here. So it was super weird. And Savannah knows her animals pretty well, and she goes in the woods, and even she was I have not heard a creature that would make a sound like that. So I was freaked out, and I walked up, and I was kind of staring off in the woods, and at one point I did try and knock back on the tree or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then I was oh, that's so weird. So we left, or we went back to sit down, and we were all what the heck? Because when I first heard it, I thought because we were drinking, because we were drinking while you fish, the thing you do, and I thought I hallucinated or something, but she heard it at the same exact time I did. So, and then Brandon comes back, and we try to tell him, and he's oh, you guys are playing, because we had talked about it before. It was so crazy. We had actually heard what we were talking about. My first thought was someone was messing with me, because our friend group likes to mess with me. But me and Savannah were the only people out there. We could hear Brandon, the gator Brandon was driving, out there, because he drove back the other direction to go grab the rest of his thing. So we know it wasn't them, but it was still super weird. And then we didn't really have any other issues. We just caught some fish, and then we went back after. And then, but the next day, Brandon had went down to fish by himself, and eventually when we came back because I had gone kayaking with some of our friends, and then when I came back, I was in the other room, and he just mentioned, he was yeah, I heard that knocking that Kara was talking about. And I shut up, and I went into the other room, and I was you heard it too? Because he was I was going to tell you. I was you can't not tell me about the knocking on wood. Really?
Right. Yeah.
So then we went back the rest of that day. They did, But we went to like a winery or whatever. So by the time we got back, it was dark and we didn't want to go outside. But the next day, we did go with Brandon back to fishing. It was raining. So we went to go explore the woods because they have like acres of property back there. Like a lot of it's rented out to local farmers. But we still have access to it. Like we can still go out on it. So we went back and we were like trying to like look around, see if we could find anything. Maybe like where's Professor Bigfoot around. We did find some cool caves, which is kind of cool. So we were walking around soaked because it was raining most of the time. It did stop raining, so it was no longer currently raining, but we were still soaking wet. And we were so excited about the caves, but we could only go. I think we only like looked at 3 or 4 of them before we were like, okay, we need to turn around. So we turned around and went back. But there are still more that we want to go explore the next time we go back because there was still some more property out that way. That was definitely giving us some weird vibes.
Huh. Sounds like you had an interesting weekend.
It's definitely interesting. I definitely wish they would do it more so we could have had more. So the area that Brandon heard the knocking was different than the area we heard it. We heard it behind us, but he was on the opposite side of the lake and he heard it behind him.
Huh. Weird.
So it is weird.
So, like, whatever it is, it's tracking.
Probably around. He probably moves around whatever it is. It might not really be Bigfoot, but some sort of creature or something.
That has some kind of brain function.
That to knock.
Know enough to knock to warn people, yeah.
Yeah, it's a thing. Bigfoot do that knocking. I tried to knock back to see if it would react, but it didn't. And I'd like to go back and explore some more because there's a lot. Like I said, it was also pouring, and I know rain kind of scares stuff away.
Yeah. Yep.
Or if I'd like to go at night.
Go find them.
I want to go at night.
Yeah.
We want to go back
at
night.
You'll need like flashlights and that in order to do that.
Well, I had flashlights, but like
fall in a hole or
we were too tired the other nights to go. But we want to go back at night anyways because there's these mushrooms that we found growing that they're called jack-o'-lantern.
To see if they glow in the dark.
Mushrooms, and they glow in the dark at night. They're bioluminescent underneath, and they glow green. Cool. It's really creepy and spooky. So hopefully they still are growing. They might not be, though. Savannah told me that they don't last very long. Like, they only a few months. Oh, we also found some fairy ring mushrooms.
Oh, yeah? Cool.
We didn't see them growing in a fairy ring, but it was the mushrooms that do...
the type that do that.
That do the fairy ring thing.
Got ya.
So that was interesting. That was my adventure into Amish country, which does tie in because it's the area. My story is placed in the same exact area that I was staying at this weekend.
Oh, cool.
So
can't wait to hear
when
that.
We get there. Yeah, it's
very
wild, and I learned a lot that I did not know. All right.
Okay.
Did you do anything fun this weekend?
No, football. That's about it.
Not as cool.
I'm in football.
You weren't in Bigfoot.
No,
but we're doing something cool in like 2 weeks.
Yeah,
we're gonna be at the Mothman Festival. So if you're there, keep an eye out. We'll be around. We'll have stickers.
Yeah, maybe we can do a meetup or something and eat somewhere with some people. That could be kind of fun. Swap stories.
Yep.
All right. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and get started this week.
Okay.
This week, I will be covering the story or the urban legend of Bloody Mary.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, picture this. You're standing in a dark bathroom in front of a mirror with a candle or a flashlight. You look in the mirror and you chant the name 3 times, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. A ghost of a woman is said to appear, sometimes holding a dead baby, because the story goes that she died because they think it's related to Mary of England, and I'll get to that in a few minutes, and that she lost her baby. And then the other, sometimes they'll say that she'll come and scratch her eyes out and take them and use them. And other times they say she'll drag you through the mirror. Was she real? And where does the urban legend of Bloody Mary come from? The woman behind the mirror is actually real, and the story of Bloody Mary was as real as you can get. Bloody Mary was originally Queen Mary I. She was born February 18th, 1516 in Greenwich, England. Now, she was the only child of King Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. Now, you got to remember, King Henry was kind of an ass, and he was a Protestant at the time, or he was Catholic at the time, but he got mad because they wouldn't let him divorce his wives. So he ended up switching over to the Protestant religion.
Oh.
So when she was 17, Henry decided to annul his marriage to her mom, Catherine. At the age of 7, he did that. And so he then decides to marry his ex-wife's maid of honor, a woman by the name of Anne Boleyn, who gave him another daughter named Elizabeth, who goes on to be Queen Elizabeth.
Why does that name sound familiar, Anne Boleyn?
Anne Boleyn. Mary were fierce enemies because she was convinced that she ended up getting her head cut off too.
She's from that musical. 6.
What musical?
The musical 6. She's one of the you haven't heard of this musical? It's about Henry and his wives.
Oh yeah, the ones that he chopped their heads off.
And there's a whole song about how she lost her head. That's why I was like, her name sounds familiar. That's why. See,
yep.
6 I haven't seen it, but I've listened to the soundtrack. It's really good.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
You'll like it. It's like very pop music, but they're like pop singer dancers, but they talk about all this like history.
Yeah. Hey, yeah. Anything to make history better. Right?
We can listen to it when we drive to Mothman.
All right, sounds good. So, as I was saying, Henry marries his ex-wife's maid of honor, Anne. And Anne Anne gets pregnant. She thought she was going to have a male child. She ends up giving birth to a daughter. Her name was Elizabeth. And she was so concerned that Henry would favor Mary over her daughter Elizabeth that she actually managed to have Parliament declare that Mary was an illegitimate child of King Henry. Poor Mary's living with her stepmother, who's, pretty evil and twisted and messed up and hates her guts with a living passion. So, since her teenage years, Mary actually had some real bad menstrual pains and irregular cycles. Sorry for anybody that doesn't like that kind of, to talk about that kind of stuff. But anyway, so she had a lot of irregular menstrual cycles and that. And people believe that was kind of what helped propel her to be so crazy and psychologically messed up, because she was under, all this stress to have a hair. Also because it made her very anxious about, life and stuff. And she was also always depressed. And they feel like that was the other reason why she got so crazy and why they call her Bloody Mary. So she took the throne in 1553 at the age of 37, and she married Prince Philip of Spain in hopes to have her, heir. So this is when she begins to go into the descent of being, Crazy Mary or Bloody Mary. Mary was starved for love because her dad didn't care for her because she was the child of, the wife that he killed and got rid of. So she really wanted love. So she thought she was ready to lavish all this love on her, new husband, who was actually 10 years younger than her. I don't make things romantic in that form. And all he cared about was he just wanted also to have a child, and that was it. He didn't care about her or love her or anything. He was only doing it just so he could have a child. So 2 months later, she got pregnant. Now, when she got pregnant, people were kind of like in disbelief and thought she was making this up. And there's all kinds of rumors floating around about, she's faking it and all this. And the public was very suspicious because of how fast she got pregnant, and rumors were spreading quickly. So Mary was due on May 9th. So she went to her private bedchambers, and this is what back then women couldn't, like nowadays you can go travel the world, 10 months pregnant. But back then you weren't allowed, and you would have to go to your chamber, your room, and stay there for like months being in bed and stuff, I guess, to make sure that... Yeah, that nothing happened to the baby or whatever. I don't know. It was a different time. So May 9th comes and goes, and the baby doesn't come, okay? So the doctors that were there with her, they decided they're going to push back the due date. They say, oh, well, maybe she's going to be born in June, okay? Well, around late May, her belly begins to shrink. Now, to most people, yeah. So that would indicate that she was not pregnant. So, we get to June, we get to July, and we're now to August, and there's still no baby in sight. So at this time, Mary decided that she was not pregnant and it's time for her to get back to her queenly duties.
What?
So she left her bedchamber childless, and, everybody was like, haha, we were right and Mary was wrong. So during her months of waiting for this baby to come, her kingdom became divided between the Protestants and the Catholics, okay? Now, keep in mind, Mary was a very devout Catholic, and she believed in the Catholic religion and felt that she wanted to unite her people under the true religion of Catholicism. So shortly before Christmas in 1554, we had the Marian persecutions happen. And this is when Mary had 240 men and 60 women were charged with being Protestants, and they were burned at the stake. And that was how she earned her name of Bloody Mary. So you may be asking, well, what happened to Mary's baby, or her pregnancy for that matter?
Yeah.
So Bloody Mary remains one of the most infamous cases of phantom pregnancy. So apparently there's like two possibilities, and here's what they say. They say that she could have had a pseudodosis, which is when someone tricks or wills their body into thinking they have pregnancy.
What?
And I know you've heard this before. Yeah. You can actually think your body into that you're pregnant, and you'll like have all the physical attributions of being pregnant. Your breasts get larger, your belly will grow, all that stuff.
Okay.
And remember, back then they didn't have pregnancy tests, so nobody could ever really trust the validity in her saying that she was pregnant. She was just missing menstrual cycles, so she assumed she was pregnant. But also keep in mind, her menstrual cycles were messed up from a very young age, so that was probably just part of her life. So they said the other possibility could be that she had an endometrial hyperplasia, which is basically the precursor for uterine cancer. And they backed that one up by saying that she was not eating a lot at the time, because, well, think about it. She thought she was pregnant, and she thought she was having morning sickness and all that kind of thing. And because her belly got so extended, I guess they were thinking maybe there was a tumor or something in there. What is Bloody Mary, or how does this work? So Bloody Mary is basically they call it a deviation ritual. Back during the late 1800s, early 1900s, or they would encourage young women to walk up a flight of stairs. Now get this, backwards, okay?
What?
Holding a hand mirror in one hand, holding a candle in the other hand, okay? And the lights were all turned off. Now, if this does not sound like a recipe for somebody falling down the steps and breaking their neck or their hip or something, but this is what they encouraged women or young girls to do, because the story goes that they thought that if they gazed into the mirror while they were on the steps, they were supposed to see their future husband's face. Sometimes people would not see their future husband's face, and they would see a skull instead. And they said the skull meant that they would probably die before they were married. So there are years later that got changed, and I'll talk just about this briefly in a few minutes. But years later, it got changed to you stand in a darkened room, usually the bathroom, because that's the easiest bathroom to make dark, right?
I remember doing
and
it.
And it's
as a
got
kid.
The full mirror, right? Yeah. So
and you have the thing lit. And then you would
yes,
spin around. Well, at least the way I did it was you spin around and you say Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary 3 times.
And you said bloody. Yes, that's the way I learned.
And she's
it
supposed
too.
to appear in the mirror next to you.
Right. And sometimes she'll, they say that she's all bloody and she'll scratch her eyes out or she'll scratch her body. Yes, that's the same way it was when I was little. But they say you take a candle or flashlight, and later on they did this, and they say that you can see your future husband's face. Now, interestingly enough, when I was researching all this stuff, I found that there is actually a scientific terminology for what's going on. Apparently, something in your brain triggers you to think when you're in the dark and you're looking in this mirror with a light shining at it, that it triggers your brain to think that you're seeing faces, because our brains were so triggered to see faces. You know what I mean? They're supposed to be a friendly type thing. And that's why they say that when people are in a dark room like that, they see the first thing they see is faces. So some of the different variations of Bloody Mary, one of them is you chant her name in a mirror 13 times, and Bloody Mary will appear to you as a witch or a corpse or a bloody ghost. She may scream at you. Sometimes they say she'll try and strangle you, like her hands will reach out through the mirror. She'll steal your soul, or she'll scratch your eyes out. Some legends use a different name. Some people have called her Hail Mary, or some have even called her Mary Worth. When I was doing some digging, they say that Mary Worth was actually a woman that during the Salem witchcraft trials that was hung for witchcraft. Her name sounds familiar.
Yeah, it does sound familiar.
And with her, they say you gotta tell them, you go into the bathroom, you do the thing, but you tell the mirror that you don't believe in Mary Worth. And supposedly, if you do that, something bad will happen to you. Like somebody did it once and they ended up breaking their hip after they had said it. They like tripped out of the bathroom door and they ended up breaking their hip. Some other things have come to happen to people also when they do the Mary Worth one. Now, I did find another story of a lady named Mary, and this is the other story that they believe of where the name Bloody Mary came from. So, in the 1800s, there lived a young girl named Mary. This was like the remember the Spanish flu or whatever was going around, okay? And they say that she got this. And back then, the only way they could check to see if you were alive or dead was to hold a mirror up to your nose to see if you were still breathing. And that's how they checked all the dead when they would go to bury them.
That's weird.
So, yeah. So, they did that. But sometimes is what would happen is people would breathe so shallowly that their breath would not show up on the mirror. And they came up with this brilliant way of knowing that if somebody truly wasn't dead, how you dig them up from their grave and stuff. So, what they would do is they would put a small hole in the coffin, okay? They would, because remember back then coffins were wooden. This was like really far back in, the 1800s or whatever. They would drill a hole in the coffin. They would have a string that is drops down in that hole and is near the person's hand. And that string would run all the way up to the house of where the person's, descendants lived. And if the person that was dead if they woke up suddenly, they could pull the string and the people in the house would hear the bell ring and they would know that the person is awake.
That's creepy.
Yeah.
So what if it drinks without, them not actually being alive?
Well, here's another thing. Here's some creepy stories that have happened. Like, the string was not in the coffin and the bell would ring automatically on its own with nobody touching no string being in the coffin. Yeah, they had, weird shit happen like that. So, anyway, her friends and parents, her parents were heartbroken. They never left the house. They were there for months on end. Their daughter never rang the string to let them know that she was still alive. And the friends of the family were fed up. They wanted these people just to live their life. So they go over, they convince the parents to go out during that day for the first time in months. And the parents decide to go with them. They tell them, well, your daughter's probably dead. She's never coming back, blah, 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 blah. So the other neighbor comes over while they're out with their other friends and fills in the grave site of where the daughter is, because at the time they had not put dirt on it. They just had the cover on top of the casket so that if she were to ring the bell, they could quickly get her out. Well, the neighbor goes over, dumps a whole bunch of dirt on top of the casket, okay? He walks away so he can't hear anything that happens. And the next thing you know, all of a sudden she wakes up. She's pulling on the bell. It's going ding, 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 ding. Her parents are out of town. They don't hear this going on. The neighbor lives, at least 10, 15 minutes away. It's not like today where he could just, was right next door. So she's freaking out in the coffin. She's trying to pull the string. Nobody hears her. And so she starts to claw and scratch at the top of the lid, hoping that she can pop it off herself, right? So not soon after, the parents come home, okay? And when they come back, they realize that the bell that had been close to the house has now moved about 10 or 20 feet towards where their daughter's buried. So they hurry up, they run out there, they start digging up all the dirt off the grave, and they go and look in there. And poor Mary's laying inside of the grave. Her hands are all shriveled up. And there's blood all over them. Her beautiful white dress they had buried her in is all bloody. And she's got this awful looking you know, her face is like total fear, and she's like screaming, like she died screaming.
Oh my god. That's terrifying.
Yeah. And they say that this is, that, you know, and they would hold, so they held the mirror underneath of her, and they say that her soul left her body during that time, and it went into the mirror, and that's why they say when you say Bloody Mary, that's who you're seeing.
I was like, where does the mirror come in? Because
yeah, because remember I told you they had to check to see if she was alive.
That makes
now
sense.
why you would think your daughter's alive when she looks like she's frozen and she's got blood all over her fingernail, you know what I mean? And so they held the mirror under there, and she was dead. I mean, there's nothing coming out, you know. So at that point, I guess they officially buried her. But that's where they say the legend of Bloody Mary came from.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's all the stuff I have about the legend of Bloody Mary. And oh yeah, one last thing. There's also a modern day legend of the Hanuko-san, which is in Japan, and they say that it strongly parallels the our legend of Bloody Mary. And in 1992, there was the movie Candyman. And if you remember in the movie Candyman, they kind of used the same idea, but they changed it from Bloody Mary to the Candyman. And when you looked in the mirror and you said his name 3 times, he would come through the mirror and he would kill you with his hook.
Yeah.
And that was like the legend of the Candyman. But yeah, that is how the legend of Bloody Mary came to be, and it's kind of some of the background on the story of Bloody Mary. Yeah. So what is your story about today?
Well, it's about a lot of things, but it's about one specific plot of land in Holmes County, where I was talking about earlier. So the book I read for this, it was called Nightmare in Holmes County. It's by Patrick Meechan. This just came out last year, so this book is pretty fresh. But it basically accounts his whole stay from 2001 to about 2009 in Amish country.
Huh.
And all of the troubles he had with the Amish and other paranormal entities messing with him in his house. So our story begins in 2001 when him and his wife bought the land. This piece of land in particular was completely surrounded by Amish people. So like on all sides, pretty much, all of his neighbors were like Amish. It was in the heart of Amish County. It's actually the specific area is actually the second largest population of Amish people. So didn't realize that. So basically, during the building of the house, because they bought the land and then they built on the land. The house didn't come with the land.
Oh, so they built the house themselves. Got it.
They didn't build it themselves. They had a contractor, which was an Amish person, or someone within the Amish community. I don't believe he was actually Amish, but like he was like friends with the Amish. So he built the house, or they began attempting to build the house. But during the building of it, there was a storm that hit and completely leveled the house. Because it was like they had things all up, and basically, so they had a inspector come out to inspect everything, to like appraise it and make sure it wasn't an issue with the building. Like they didn't build it incorrectly, that basically they did all that they could. And it got approved, so they got like the money refunded, and then they were able to buy new supplies because they pretty much had to rebuild the entire house from scratch. However, so they auctioned off all the wood, the old wood, the bad wood or whatever. So so there was about $20,000 of wood that was auctioned off, but it was put like an auction in that area, and it was bought for $200.
That was it?
That's it.
Wow.
But coincidentally, the person who bought it was a cousin of the builder, which was a little suspicious.
Yeah, they're just going to buy it and reuse it for their next project.
But, yeah, basically they get free wood.
Terrible.
But yeah, so that's kind of where it began of things were kind of getting a little shady. It was supposed to take 3 months to build the house, but it took 7 months, which they were kind of upset about. They moved in September of 2002. After moving to the house, Chelsea, his wife, had begun hearing strange noises in the house. So as soon as they moved in, everything kind of they started hearing weird sounds that were not normal, especially for a brand new house.
Right, yeah.
So they were kind of a little sus because of all the weird noises, and they thought maybe it's like a building issue because they had issues with the builder. He seemed really cool at first, but he kind of got a little short with him and very aggressive after. So they had someone appraise the house again to see if there was anything wrong with the building, and there was a lot wrong, and they trying to sue the original builder or whatever, or try and get him to like fix the issues,
fix the problems.
Basically,
right.
So one of the issues was the fireplace. There was nothing underneath the fireplace, so the fireplace was just sinking. Like there was nothing underneath it in the basement to help support the fireplace. So that was sinking, weird. So that had to be taken care of. It was. Mm-hmm. They took a lot of weird corners. It was supposed to have like a jacuzzi, and then they didn't ever put in the jacuzzi. They just put like a normal bathtub. Just a lot of weird shortcuts, and it kind of upset him, which I don't blame him. But then, and here lies one of the interesting issues in this thing. The police just don't do anything in that area, like at all. This guy calls the police later on in the story like 5 times a day about like weird stuff that's going on.
But that's because the Amish people have their own rules.
Well, no, because they pay for that. Some of the things that they talk about is that the Amish elect these people, and as long as they keep them in good favor, they'll keep electing them. Because it's an elected role. Gotcha. It was the sheriff he kept calling.
Got you. Okay.
So he's already at a disadvantage because he lives in that area.
Well, yeah, and he's an outsider, so they see him as an outsider, a Catholic, and they want him gone.
And it's different than whatever. The Amish is a different religion than theirs. They weren't able to get him to like get the money paid or whatever, so they just ate the cost, and they hired a contractor to fix everything. And a lot of the strange noises stops, but there were some that did continue. One night while they were home alone, the dryer door shut by itself, like on their dryer, which is kind of strange.
Weird, yeah.
Especially with how dryers are, you have to like push them shut, so.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And he began having issues with, the Amish people would just trespass on his land, like often.
That's weird.
He actually had issues with behind, the person directly behind him. The Amish guy came up and was like, hey, I would like to pay to have a path through your property to get to the street because my son is stuck on a landlocked lot. And he's like, why would I do that? You guys could just build a bridge and then he wouldn't have to worry about that.
Exactly.
But they didn't want to do it and then Patrick, the main guy, was like, well, this will devalue the house. If there is because they have to build, it would literally go across the entirety of the thing and you would have to worry about. So he was like, no, I'm not doing that. So then pretty much the entire time he just deals with these guys just coming even though that they told him no. And he calls the police on them multiple times too. And then they're like, well, did you know you were trespassing? I don't think I was. And then they're like, okay, he's good. That literally happened multiple times. Like he would call the police on these guys and they would have it on record and they're like, we can't really do anything. So
wow.
They also began seeing shadows in the corner of his eye. So there's shadow people hanging out around the house now. Chelsea began to become very aggressive towards him. Very, physically aggressive. Like, she would just, attack him, which was kind of a red flag. And she also ended up moving the Bible from his room into the living room. From their room that they stayed in together. Oh, basically, I guess she didn't like it in the bedroom. So, while driving home from the hospital one day, a man had collapsed. He was clearly having a heart attack. It was in the lot of the hospital. And he was like, please, we need to stop to stop and get this guy into the hospital. And she was like, no, and refused to stop and just drove off. He's like, oh, well, he's in the hospital. He's near the hospital. They'll take care of it. And so he was like, what the heck? And then they're having a lot of family issues because of her sudden aggressiveness and all this stuff happening with the house that they brought up. Let's go to marriage counseling. And they both agreed. So the evening after their counseling, Chelsea and Patrick had been in the living room and they were watching an episode of A Haunting. And suddenly, Patrick felt as if Chelsea's presence had left the room. He began asking her some questions to, get her attention. And he did this 3 times, and she would not, after not responding, he looked back behind her to see if she was just sitting straight up with her head looking toward the ceiling, and her eyes and her mouth were wide open like she was in a trance.
Very weird.
So he asked her again, hey, are you okay? And she finally snapped out of the trance, and she had no recollection of whatever happened, and she hadn't heard him asking him at all the 3 times. And then paranormal activity really started to pick up in the house. They started seeing more weird stuff. The TV channel would start changing on its own, which was when they tried to like call and talk about it, they were like, well, that's normal if you have satellite. Because like apparently your neighbors can change the channel, if that's a thing. But all of their neighbors are Amish. So they're not gonna have any.
None of them are gonna have
so so they were able to be like, okay, well that doesn't make any sense. The lights were also flickering. They would apparently turn on and off. And on August 26, 2006, Chelsea violently attacked Patrick. She swung wildly at him, trying to hit him and punch him in the face and spit in his. And then when he restrained her, she would start spitting on him, which is kind of crazy. Yeah.
Ew.
He restrained her, and she apparently went into another room, and she called 911, but then she realized that she was the one attacking him, and it probably wasn't going to look well, so she hung up the phone, and she was like, oh, I need to, so she was like, suddenly being nice to him, and be like, oh yeah, have a nice day at work, honey, blah, 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 I love you, and he was like, what the heck, she was just literally attacking me. So after that incident, Patrick reached out to a priest about this, because he was like, oh, I forgot to mention this, but if you do read this book, he does talk about Catholicism and like lots of Bible verses he repeats and all about his faith. I kind of skipped a lot of that and just kind of focused mainly on the paranormal aspects of this, but like it is demonic in nature, especially the story as we're progressing, just letting people know. But, so Patrick, he reached out to a priest, and the pastor named John told him that he was very much believed that Chelsea might be possessed by a demon. So, some of the things that Chelsea was doing was kind of a little odd, but she would sit alone at night watching a haunting, which was very unusual for her because when they were originally dating, she refused to watch horror movies or anything scary. When they dated, like, she did not like horror, and she would just watch it, like, just nonchalantly, not reacting to any of, like, the violence in the show or anything. So I thought that was kind of weird. So, there was a lot of speculation that she was cheating on him, and on October 7th, Chelsea had basically picked up some stuff, and she left with a crock pot full of food, and all of her clothes were still in the house when she left. Yeah, she pretty much just picked up and gone. She did. She spoke on the phone to Patrick about the marriage, and she was like, "Yeah, we're done. I don't want to be with you anymore." Blah blah blah. And she also told him during this conversation, "Oh, by the way, at 3 a.m., I woke up and I heard someone ring the doorbell, and then they let themselves in." That's all she said, and weird. He was like, "What? No?" And she was like, "Yeah, that's what I heard. That's what happened." Just very ominous thing that at 3 a.m. someone just rings the bell and then they let themselves in the house.
Right. Selves in. Yeah.
So
weird.
After Chelsea left and they kind of, most of the paranormal stuff like kind of mellowed out for a bit. Which obviously it didn't stop completely, but he was like, okay, things are trying to calm down. And on February 1st, 2007, their divorce was finalized. So paranormal activity did begin to pick up again as like the months went on. February 11th, Patrick noticed that his house had stopped, like the heat in his house had stopped working. It had been snowing outside, so it was pretty cold. So he went out, he called an emergency line being like, hey, my heat is not working. And the guy on the phone was like, hey, you should check the thing so before I have to charge you for like an emergency visit or whatever. And he checked the furnace, and it turned out there had been the like emergency shutoff, or like the shutoff was turned on, so the heat to his house was turned off.
Purposefully.
Obviously, for somebody or something. But there was snow covering it. Because it had been snowing 2 days ago. So it was completely covered in snow.
Oh, weird.
So there was no way that something... And there was no footsteps or anything like that would have told him that someone had come. So he's very confused how in the heck that turned off. But he turned it back on and his heat was just like normal, and it was very strange. So this is where it gets a little weird. So he basically, after like all this time alone, he starts doing research, and he's convinced himself that the Amish are doing witchcraft. Which specifically, apparently in that area, there's a type of witchcraft they would use called powwow, and it's like a mixture of old world witchcraft and Native American witchcraft. So Patrick actually began to think at one point that he was possessed himself, because like the things were still happening. And in October, Bob Larson was coming to Canton, Ohio, and for a spiritual warfare seminar. So he went to it, and it was like a $500 session, and he went to it, and he felt so good after. He was like, I'm ready to fight the world, okay? He's got his little spiritual welfare thing. And so when he comes back, he actually notices that one of his neighbors had placed a bull skull in his yard, facing their house, very close to their house. He kind of looked into this, and he discovered that there's a form of witchcraft that uses hanging skulls to curse your neighbors. So now he's thinking, okay, these Amish people are cursing me. So that's where it gets a little interesting about that whole thing. One thing I didn't talk about. So after he got divorced, he was trying to sell his house and get out of there, because he obviously was not welcomed by the Amish, and the Amish people they wanted to buy his land, but they wanted to buy it very cheap. They did not want. So they were kind of sabotaging him trying to sell it. Like they had like I'm talking like those like little stands with like information about like an open house or whatever, or sales. They would take all of them, like all of the flyers from there. And they would, and at one point they destroyed his the for sale sign. That's what I'm thinking of. They completely destroyed it, and then they blamed it.
The plastic
they blamed it, saying that the cows did it. When he called the police. Oh yeah, please. But he got home at 10 p.m. and it was still fine. But then when he woke up in the morning, it was gone. But the cows would have done that. But aren't active at night, so how would they have done that? But then, so he's doing some more research, trying to figure out, what else is going on. Right. So the Greenville Treaty. Have you heard of that before? The land was built on a line where the Native Americans were kicked off the line. This is like American history. Okay. It was like basically how they got a lot of Ohio, because there's a lot of Native Americans that lived in Ohio. But a part of them getting kicked off the land, they cursed the land. So, and his property was like very close to this border. Like almost like on the border of where the land was cursed. So he's kind of like, oh great, well, maybe my land was cursed also, because he's having all like this crazy stuff happening with like, and actually in 1777, a Shawnee chief, Cornstalk, when he was dying because he got shot with a gun. He cursed the land, and that land that he cursed is now where Point Pleasant, West Virginia is.
Yeah, I've heard about Cornstalk, yes.
Well, that was where Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and that is why a lot of people think that that area is so haunted. Like
Right, because the Native Americans are
pissed off, and they kind of cursed it all.
That's why Mothman appears.
Yeah, they think it has to do with Mothman. Which I always thought it was funny that the book talked about Mothman, and we're literally gonna go hang out there in like
interesting. Yeah.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Basically.
Yep.
But
interesting.
That was my story. Basically this guy, he was kinda the Amish. He basically was kinda targeted by the Amish mafia. We talked about this a little bit before. But like I'm talking about this on the thing, but he would call the police a lot, and they couldn't really do anything about him because the Amish kind of pay him off. Or, like, if they don't like what you're doing, they can just back someone else. Because there's so many of them in that area that they can kind of get around laws and rules in that area.
Yeah,
it's unfortunate. Is what it is.
So whatever happened to him? Did he end up selling the house?
I don't know.
Or did the Amish take it over? What happened with the house?
I don't know. I haven't gotten to the end of the book. There's still like 25 minutes of the book left.
Well, you'll have to. That's fine. You'll have to update us.
Yeah, it started getting a little intense, and I was like, I don't have enough time to finish. It was more just like him just kind of going on the stuff about like magic, and like I said, the witchcraft. He found a lot of people who were used to be in the Amish that were like, Amish really, they practice and they learn witchcraft really early on. Yeah,
really.
There's like there's apparently like some other stuff about it too, which I had no clue that they participated in witchcraft.
I thought that would be
That's
against
what I
their
thought
religion because I thought I was gonna say, they're all preachy about the whatever. But anyway, that's weird. Okay,
but yeah.
Oh well, learn something new about people every day.
Since I was like hanging out in this general area, it's very strange to like read this story after I've just like hanging out there, and I thought I've already been in this. Like they talked about, he went to a church in like Berlin, which is an area I went to this weekend. So I'm like, this is so weird. Now I wonder if I've driven past that house or like where it was.
I don't know.
Now I want to figure out
like
where the heck is this house at? Because we drove through like Amish County and everything. Did like back roads and stuff.
I'm sure if you Google it.
But well, that's what I have today. It was very interesting.
Yeah, it sounds interesting.
I wasn't expecting it. It went from like she was possessed by a demon to like shadow people running around.
So wait, speaking of that, whatever. I mean, was she normal once she got away from him and away from the Amish, or do we know what happened to her?
He didn't really talk about it, other than like she like pretty much left him and took all his money and ran away.
Okay,
I don't know.
Now we need to find out the rest.
Well, now you
of
have
the
to read the
story.
book to find out yourself.
I guess. All right. And what's the name of the book again?
A Nightmare in Holmes County. You can find it on Amazon. Okay. It was on Kindle for like $5.
All right, there you go, people. Yeah. Check it out. See what
it
it's
was
all
like.
About.
It really went into like the social, like them interacting with the Amish. I tried to more focus on the paranormal aspects, but there was some crazy stuff the Amish people were doing to like torment them. Like I was like, oh my gosh.
Hazing by the Amish.
Basically what they were going on about, and like they would come up with fake names to like try and fake him out thinking he had a buyer, but really they didn't. So they were trying like social warfare to try and get him to sell it for way cheaper than he wanted. And the Amish bank was going to come appraise the house to like devalue it.
Oh, that's not cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he thought. But you could tell in the end, he really did not trust the Amish. He did not want to sell it, the property to Amish at all. After, I think he probably could have been a little nicer because he was just like screaming at these people, and like there's some things I'm like, I feel like he could have handled this a lot better.
Probably. To get it to the point of, they're harassing him and all that. I'm sure there's a better way to have handled it.
We'll never know. But like they would talk about how they would rent the land off to people, and that's something that the people I would stay with, they would rent their land off. So like that's a thing that happens in that area clearly, where they will rent their land to Amish people to like use for farm. I don't know why they would. It must be cheaper for them than to actually own the land. I'm guessing probably, it's like property taxes or something.
Probably.
But I thought it was interesting. Well, if you enjoyed our podcast today, follow us on Instagram at Two Scaredy Cats Podcast, and please be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It really helps the show get discovered. And tune in 2 weeks for a new episode. And to all our scaredy cats and kittens out there, remember, curiosity didn't kill these two scaredy cats.